Hi, we're here for another Empathy Power Up with me, Kevin Shaw, and my amazing co-host Amy J. Wilson. And we have our first Wonder Woman of the month. We're celebrating Women's History Month. I love being surrounded by these two amazing women right here, and our special guest, amazing woman that we wanted to highlight this month. And our first episode of this month is Katya Stepanov. Katya, welcome to Empathy Power Up. Really excited to have you here. Empathy Power Up is our weekly dose of empathy where we just inject 15 minutes into everyone's week so they can take away something and grow as we go. But I just want to do a quick intro for Katya and then we'll jump right into the conversation. So Katya is a Belarusian Jewish American facilitator, speaker, writer, director, actor, and immersive experience designer who trains and works with leaders and individuals and organizations to build understanding across cultural divides and guide authentic social change. Katya received her BFA from Carnegie Mellon University School of Drama and is passionate about empowerment through storytelling. Love your journey so far, your story, Katya. The part that I think we got to know each other is through this common thread of empathy and storytelling. That's how I got to know Amy. We're all part of this empathy community. So first, thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for being a Wonder Woman and making an impact in our communities in the world. Thank you for doing that. Welcome. Would love to first really just jump into the conversation and learn about what led you to get into the storytelling approach, and then we'll talk about your work in Inheritance Project.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, first of all, both of you, for having me on your Empathy Power Up. I love the name. I think that empathy does give us power, and empathy is at the root of me falling in love with storytelling to begin with. So a little bit about me. It's interesting, in light of recent events, I had this whole conversation with my mother about my own identity, because I was born in Minsk, Belarus, and I was born with a different name than the one that I have now. I was born Yekaterina Olegovna Stepanova was my full name, and it was changed when I came to the United States. And I came as a Jewish refugee. I was born 4 days after the Soviet Union fell apart. And a nuance that many people might not know is that in the former Soviet Union, in your passport, you had two categories. You had your nationality or your ethnicity, and that was determined by your bloodline. So if you had grandparents who were born in Ukraine, then you were Ukrainian. If you had ancestry born in Russia, you were Russian. If you were Jewish, that superseded both of these things. You were seen as Jewish above being Russian or Ukrainian. And my ancestors are from both sides, Jewish, Russian, Ukrainian, and then you had your citizenship, which was the place you were born. So I would be considered a Ukrainian, Russian, Jewish girl born in Belarus. So ironically, right, because when we came as Jewish refugees to the United States in 1992, here in America, I am viewed in many different contexts. If someone didn't have any conversations with me, they might think that I'm Katie from Connecticut. When I do introduce myself to people, they often ask, where are you from? And then that is this very complex geopolitical historical answer of all of these nuances, contexts. And so often I would let people just get away with thinking, oh, she's Russian. But it really is important now to understand all of these nuances, and that identity is this very complex mixed bag. And just because someone lives in a country doesn't mean they are actually that nationality. So it's a really multi-layered identity that I inherited from my ancestors. And when I came to the United States as a refugee with my very young parents, obviously we didn't speak English. And when you don't speak the language of the country that you're growing up in, you have to start to understand the world in any way you can. And for me, that was on an emotional level, and it was on analyzing how people what people were really saying. You know, if I couldn't understand what they were saying in words, I would try to understand them through feeling, through observing their body language. And I learned a lot. I became obsessed with humans. Why do humans do what they do? Why are these miscommunications constantly happening all around me? And so I started to get really interested in people, and by virtue of that, in storytelling, because I really believe that the story that we tell about ourselves, the stories that we were told about the world, the stories that we tell each other, they really impact the way we see the world. So for me, that's where storytelling is this universal, powerful tool. And you have to be so aware and diligent with what stories you are telling yourself or what stories you have inherited, and understanding how those color your behavior. And so this I knew from a very young age. I fell in love with storytelling. I fell in love with my parents saw that I had a lot of energy and I needed to have an outlet. So actually I spent 13 years as a professional Latin ballroom dancer. That was my first expression of art. You know, I learned how to express with my body through dance. And then I also picked up singing, and acting came much later. I thought I was a singer dancer, and I really fell in love with theater. And I fell in love with theater as a space where you can both have a cathartic experience of understanding other characters and also go to see examples of yourself and have this, you know, ability to understand humans through the stories that you're watching. And it's, I'm sure you may have talked about this on the show before, but when you're listening to someone tell their story, mirror neurons activate in your mind and you are reliving the experiences of the person speaking to you. So for me, empathy and storytelling is a peacemaking tool. It's a way that we can actually see each other as humans first, and then as whatever else we need to be seen as, our roles, our affiliations, you know, whatever it might be. So I would say that that's what brought me on the path of storytelling. And I did study acting at Carnegie Mellon University. And it also was an incredible experience for me to dive into 10,000 hours of somatic exercises and understanding storytelling from a very technical level. And in that program, I started thinking even then, these are skills that everyone needs. These are not skills that just actors should have. We should all be able to understand who we are and what stories we carry within us, and you know, what stories we empower ourselves with or disempower ourselves with. So I started thinking even then, how do we bring this conversation into the world on a larger scale? But understanding that the lens for me was inheritance came a little bit later in my journey, after I graduated and started being a professional actor, and I started moving into other ways of applying my storytelling skills to different jobs. So I became a yoga instructor. I became really interested in meditation and mindfulness and guiding people through physical processes. And then I also became a team building facilitator, and I started designing game-based interactive scavenger hunts for teams all across the United States. And I think Inheritance Project was born from the overlap of mindfulness, storytelling, and facilitating experiences for teams, where they open their minds and do something completely different than what they're used to.
Wow. Wow, love the story. Amy, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, there's so many things resonate with me. We could probably talk all day, but like we were saying, we only have 15 minutes that we try to insert, this empathy, like powering up through empathy in this work. And one of the things that thread I wanted to pull from you is like, one of the things that one of our collaborators talks about is a lot of times we focus on differences, like what makes each other different. But actually, we wanted to flip the narrative with one of our collaborators on like what makes us the same, right? And what connects us in a deeper way. And there's many different ways. I could go into a million different ways, but I wanted to see how you react to that, that kind of statement about like we're actually more alike than we actually are different. So tell us more about that.
You have hit the bullseye. This is the paradox of identity work. This is the paradox of DEI. It's this reality that on one side, we're all completely unique. No one else in the world has your set of 4,094 plus ancestors that had to live their lives in order for you to be living, breathing here today. So you are this unique combination. So when I say inheritance, I'm talking about everything you've inherited from your ancestors in terms of both your physical traits and your behaviors and psychological traits and perspectives and, you know, this whole vast world of inheritance. So you have all of that unique inheritance, and in all of the workshops that we facilitate, the number one takeaway that people bring into our group discussions is, wow, I was in a breakout room with 4 people from completely different parts of the world with completely different backgrounds, and we all connected on X, Y, Z. We're all the same. And so you have on the other side of the paradox this reality that we do have so much more in common than we have different about ourselves, but we inherit. You have to start asking yourself this question: what is the point of the division narrative? You know, who does it benefit? So there's this double-edged sword of, I want to be seen in my individuality, and that's important, and everyone should be honored for the unique, complex person that they are. And what is more beneficial to the world, us focusing on our similarities or us focusing on our differences? And I think everyone has to answer that question for themselves.
So one thing, knowing your story, what your inheritance story and what you've shared, especially around what's happening in the world right now with Ukraine and Russia, it's heavy times. I'm sure, like, I can't even imagine what you're going through with your story, being refugees, Jewish refugee family coming through, having that background. How, in this time, what is something that you would want to share to help people sort of bring to that similarity level and start to understand what's happening in the world?
Thank you for asking, giving me a platform to speak on it even briefly, because I know we don't have that much time.
We can go a little bit longer.
We always do.
I think that the most important message I want people to take away is people are not their leaders. And I think this comes up for people in myriad different ways, and it'll resonate with people in myriad different ways. But the reality is that if you look at history, there is a big divide between leaders and dictators who have the power to make devastating choices, and the people living inside of that reality. Mm-hmm. And I want us all to be really careful with this kind of like almost like watching from the sidelines and cheering for a side thing that the world will try to make you do. It's not black and white.
It's not a binary. Yeah.
It's not binary. And while I completely agree with trying to stop Putin, who is an autocratic dictator, and personally I think he's out of his mind, and it's a really dangerous and volatile situation, clearly, and everyone in Russia will also suffer as a result of this. This is not a war that is supported actively by the Russian people. They are forced into this situation by one person. And that is really important to keep in mind, because it can be really easy. I think my biggest fear is that suddenly there will be this huge wave of anti-Russian rhetoric in the United States, and you have a lot of people here who speak Russian who have no even affiliation with Russia. I worry about that. I worry about, are people going to suddenly feel, like they need to hide who they are? On the other side of that, essentially everybody in this situation is suffering because of the choices of one person. And I think that person needs to be held accountable to the fullest extent possible. and we need to focus on the people first. So we need to focus on the refugees. We need to focus on the people of Russia who are now completely bankrupt, trapped in their homes, unable to protest, and have no idea what their future is going to look like, or if they're ever going to be able to leave the country ever again. This is a very frightening reality. So I have friends on all sides of this situation, this war. I have friends trapped in Russia that have no way to protest and are scared for their lives. I have friends in Ukraine running, fleeing from bombs, destruction, war, and in grave danger. And everyone feels, it's like a simultaneous sense of helplessness and also determination to withstand this and to find a way out. And, it's really important now more than ever that people become unified for the common cause of peace and for saving people's lives. And the other thing I want to say is the global response we're seeing is unprecedented. And if we can help Ukrainian refugees, we can help refugees from every war-torn nation. And it shouldn't just be this one European conflict that wakes up the consciousness of the collective. This is, there are people trying to escape war every day, and those people need help. So if we're able to mobilize aid, global aid, to waive visa restrictions and drive people in cars and house them and clothe them and feed them and get them free flights, then clearly we're able to do that for all victims of war and terror and conflict. And so I hope that we can see that this is the breaking point of authoritarian identity-based violence. This is an inflection point, and how we deal with this moment in history will define a great deal, I think, for the rest of our lives.
Absolutely, yeah. One thing I wanted to just bring up, like, Kevin, I know you were reacting too, but I think we both were reacting at the same time. I think one of the things that I write about in my book, Empathy for Change, How to Create a More Understanding World, is I talk about how the pandemic, and there's research that shows that when in times of crisis, we become more pro-social. We care more about each other is what it comes down to. We start looking at the humanness of people, right? And so one of my hopes, and a lot of the facilitation conversations and facilitated dialogues I'm having, is this is a chance for us to stay and fight and create a new world.
Yes.
So it sounds like you kind of created an idea of like what that world might be like, but what do you think is necessary for us to get there?
Do we have another hour?
Yes.
First, I think that people need to look inwards. So it's like we can all be unified in our own self-inquiry and looking at our own, what we can each do as an individual. So I think that's the first. If we've been awakened, conscious, suddenly this crisis has woken us out of a deep slumber, and we suddenly care about, things we didn't care about before. That's great, but I think it has to start with who am I? How much do I know about the situation? What can I do to educate myself? And what can I do to do something that actually will make a difference? And I think a lot of us fall into the trap of, I'll just, get in a fight with someone on LinkedIn comments. And you have to ask yourself, is that actually helping anyone? Or could you use that same energy to get involved in your local community effort to help whoever is suffering in your own community? So start with yourself. Start with, applying this empathy that you feel for people suffering to the people you can actually affect. I think that's step number one. And then I would say step number two is I hope that that's an opportunity for people to educate themselves about global affairs and global history, because it all seems so far away and like it doesn't affect us but it absolutely does. And so if this is a moment where everyone's asking themselves, I don't understand, it's really intentional that at least in America, Americans were kept from knowing Russian history. That was very intentional for many, many years in the making. So if you have the ability and time, do your research and understand what's really going on here and what's really at stake. And then I think if we all were looking inward, mobilizing to do what we can, staying informed, and banding together to put pressure on the leaders of the world to make the changes that we see necessary, a lot will change. I also really hope that there is some silver lining and that the people of Russia can band together to have some sort of resistance from within to what's going on. I know that that's really hard to ask. I'm sitting here in America saying, go out and protest when, you could be arrested and put in jail for 20 years as a result
or killed, right?
Yeah. But I think, change has to happen from within. And as much as we can try to change things from the outside, it is going to come down to the change happening from within. So that's my short answer.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, this was a powerful moment. This is why, Katya, you're a Wonder Woman to us, and how you're showing for folks listening in, like Inheritance Project. It's an incredible company that Katya is CEO of, and is co-founded with amazing people, and she does amazing work in bringing those storytelling and the power of empathy to your organization. So check it out. Connect with Katya on LinkedIn and all those platforms, because I really love the relationship I've built with Katya, and I am hoping to continue building on that. And thank you for coming and sharing with such vulnerability, authenticity, and love. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Definitely. You also shared, you just modeled the behavior that I think we need to say, and also just helped us provide a roadmap on how we could do a theory of change on how things are today. So thank you for that. And it's not often when I get goosebumps in like the middle of these conversations, but I got it twice today. So thank you for that too. So
thank you so much. Thanks for sharing my story. And if anyone wants resources or more information, you can always also follow my personal account. Just my name at Katya Stepanov. I'm sharing all types of resources for refugees, live updates. So, feel free to get involved, and please check us out, and, let us know if you want to have an Inheritance Project conversation and in your community or your workplace. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Take care. See you next week, everybody.